welcome back to The Cine Skinny, the podcast from the people behind the Skinny magazine. It's a bit of a different show this week. It's Jamie here hosting because Peter is off on his holidays. And he is also AWOL. She's in London for LFF, but we might be hearing a little report from her later, maybe. We don't really know. So listen in to find out. So it's just me and Ellie this week. So for a bit of a change, we're coming to you from Glasgow rather than Edinburgh. So Ellie, how does it feel to be recording in the best city in Scotland?
It does feel nice. It's a really lovely day in Glasgow. Like, I think the sun hasn't come out for about 2 weeks now, but like it's all very orange. The leaves are hitting. Yeah. Is it the exact middle of October right now, or is that the day this comes out?
Right, yeah, right in the middle of fall. Mm-hmm. October is feeling very kind of Christmassy.
Yeah.
Well, not Christmassy. It's very, very autumny.
Yeah. So sort of walking around the south side today was like it's like the sort of long suburb shots in Halloween where the like long pavements that go on forever and all the leaves are falling very orangey. So perfect mood setter for our mid-October episode.
It is, because we're going to be chatting Halloween, if that wasn't clear from Ellie since
foreshadowing.
So it's quite a low-key show today, since it's only 2 hours. So we're going to be reviewing 2 quite small but quite interesting, I think, American indie films from debuting directors. That is Plainclothes and Good Boy. And yeah, as Ellie mentioned, we're also going to be discussing horror films, things that are on the horizon, things to watch at home, things to watch at the cinema. But before all that, as usual, Ellie, we're going to do what you've been watching. So what have you been watching?
So my good friend had her 30th birthday, and for her 30th birthday celebration booked out the CCA's cinema room to show all of her friends her favourite childhood film, which was Transformers the movie from 1986. I know nothing about Transformers. I know Optimus Prime, and maybe that's it. And there's the Michael Bay films. But
yeah, of course.
Even then, I don't think I've seen more than like one of those.
Yeah, you're far too young for Transformers. Yeah. Like, how old's your friend? Because like this is like...
Well, it was her 30th birthday.
But even still, like, this is like... B30 is a bit... Because like Transformers, the movie must be like the mid 80s, is it?
86, I think it was. But the thing about this friend is that she's an animator, and this film is very significant in the history of animation. It's very significant in the history of film in general, not only because Orson Welles recorded his lines as Unicron 5 to 10 days before he passed away, so it's like his last ever possible film role, which seems sort of like, I don't know, when I first learned about that fact like years ago that Orson Welles' last film role was Transformers the movie, I'm like, that seems very silly for Orson Welles' career. It's not. Orson Welles' career in general, like most of it was the kind of like shameless commercialization, like advertisement shilling, which he does fantastically in that sort of viral internet video where he's trying to advertise this Californian champagne but can't because he's too drunk on it.
There's also the Bird's Eye advert, I'm sure. Isn't it a Bird's Eye piece?
There's a Bird's Eye advert. There's a poster somewhere. I keep seeing it online. I don't know if it's fake or not, but it's him doing an advertisement for Peeps marshmallows, and he's like, whenever the craving for marshmallow-based confection persists, I must insist upon Peeps, which is incredibly awesome. So playing a gigantic robotic planet that eats other gigantic robotic planets isn't really that bizarre in the grand scheme of things. But the film itself is really, really enjoyable. Like I say, the animation is absolutely stunning. You don't see this level of like hand-drawn 2D animation from Western studios as much at all anymore. But the entire thing looks like Cowboy Bebop. Like, it's incredibly stylish.
What was it? I just presumed it would be Japanese.
Well, actually, maybe you're right about that.
Because I know that the original cartoon was maybe Japanese, but I could be wrong. Like, like I feel like all the cartoons that we watched as a kids, like on like the Cartoon Network or whatever, were like Japanese. Like
looking at the sort of credits now, like it is directed by Nelson Shin, who is South Korean, but it's also written by an American, Ron Friedman. And obviously, like, the series was big in America as its own kind of thing. Like the fact that there is this voice cast, not just with Orson Welles, but other famous people like Judd Nelson, Eric Idle. I think off the top of my head, like Leonard Nimoy is in it. So like it has a lot of like Western star power to it. And definitely like, I don't know, like appeases a lot of like 80s Western sensibilities. So like I say, it's very Star Wars-y. It's very, I don't know, like, to be completely honest, as my first real exposure to Transformers, it was kind of unrelenting. Like, this film, how long does it run for? Not long at all, not super long. 85 minutes. And I don't think the action lets up once in those 85 minutes. It is just big alien robots beating the shit out of each other for 85 minutes straight. There's this, like, very fun 80s, like, Bryan Adams sounding, like, feel good sort of fist pumping guitar rock ballad that just plays the whole way through, even the down moments. Like, it's quite ridiculous. And I mean, slight spoilers for Transformers the movie, but this was also significant because like within the first 20-30 minutes, this is where Optimus Prime dies, and like children left crying because they thought this was the end of Transformers in general. And frankly, like I looked it up, the screenwriter was like, this was some bullshit that the Hasbro execs were trying to pull on us to try and just like get us to clear out all of the Transformers so we could bring in a new line of expensive. I quite like the way that he talked about it quite cynically. He was like, you know, they were just trying to sell new toys, and I'm like, that's all of Transformers. Like, that's quite funny to kind of, oh no, they don't care about the real art behind Transformers, when like it started essentially as a commercial for these toys. And it's great for that reason. Like, it's great for its energy and its vibrancy. But like, I don't know, it is very clever that they just sort of throw out character death in a way that now with like kids films and like family animated movies is definitely used a lot more carefully and a lot more intelligently, because they were thinking they could just kick out Optimus Prime, the most iconic Transformer of all time, and the kids wouldn't be traumatized by this. And in fact, this is really interesting that because of that, when the UK release came along, they had to have a voiceover at the very end saying that like the Transformers will return, because the sort of unceremonious character death just felt so unbelievably conclusive, as well as the fact that this was a big deal. It was Transformers the movie, and also everyone hated it and nobody, like, it did terribly at the box office. So it very, very much could have felt like the end of Transformers, but fortunately it was not. It lived long enough for Michael Bay to make these incredibly shitty post 9/11 kind of American imperialist films.
I believe there's a new cartoon as well, but I've never seen it. Like, I like it. Like, it's kind of like came back for a new generation, I reckon.
I think this is the thing. I think there's been cartoon series of Transformers over the years. Like, they've rebooted it multiple times. That's why I'm kind of comfortable saying that Optimus Prime dies in this one, because like any properties of Transformers that exist now will probably have Optimus Prime front and center. But I don't think that I'm not super familiar with how much Unicron comes back, because clearly they can't get Orson Welles to return. Unfortunately not. Well, I mean, AI, who knows? True. What have you been watching?
Well, I've actually been watching loads of films because LFF is on at the minute, and obviously GFT is doing this kind of LFF on tour thing. So I've seen like a lot of big ones like Begonia, the new Yorgos Lanthimos, Knives Out, the new kind of Knives Out film, Hamnet. But I think I'll leave all those for a few weeks because they're going to be coming out over the next couple of months, unless Annie, if she appears, discusses them later. So the best thing I've seen recently, the best old film, was The Wiz from 1978, which is a kind of Motown version of The Wizard of Oz, directed by Sidney Lumet. Now, all I knew about this film is it was a box office disaster and a critical failure, and I just assumed it was bad. It's shown as part of Black History Month at GFT, and I just thought go along because I was curious, and it's absolutely amazing. I was so stunned by how good it was. So, well, the music's great. The music's by the supervisor for the music was Quincy Jones. It was like originally a stage play, or a Broadway musical rather, and Quincy Jones came on part of like Motown Productions. Like, they kind of rejigged a lot of the songs, and I think he wrote a few new ones. And it's just banger after banger. The music's so good. The singing is great, obviously, because Diana Ross plays Dorothy. Michael Jackson, in one of his only film roles, I think, plays the Scarecrow. Nipsey Russell, who's like a great poet, plays the Tin Man. So it's got a really great cast, really great songs. But what made it really stand out to me was the production design. So it's like Oz has been like turned into this kind of like exaggerated version of New York. Like, Dorothy lives in Harlem, and like the story is like she's now a school teacher in this, and she's like very kind of mousy, never been below like, I don't know, 100 and something street. So she hasn't really adventured far, and then, you know, as in the original, a kind of storm comes and takes her and Toto somewhere, and they end up basically downtown in Brooklyn. But it's all like a kind of fantastic version of it. So yeah, it just uses New York and the real locations of New York really well. Like, a lot of real locations are used with like backgrounds and stuff, and just they've set up the streets. So like the Yellow Brick Road is now like goes across the Brooklyn Bridge. The Wizard of Oz lives at the Twin Towers. Like, the Twin Towers Plaza becomes like this kind of like amazing spectacle. The Cowardly Lion is like one of the like stone lions outside the like library. So it's like really, really creative. Like, I think the best was like the Munchkins are now like graffiti. the like graffiti that comes to life, and they're like neon coloured. So it looks amazing. The production design is incredible. And interestingly, it was written by Joel Schumacher, who would go on to do like obviously Batman in the 90s. And the vision of New York here does remind me a little bit of like the vision of Gotham City and his films, like really neon and over the top and sort of crazy. And there's something strange going on in the film, because it's like it uses a lot of kind of like racial stereotypes. It's as if Dorothy's fighting through all these kind of like racial stereotypes. And I don't know if like, I haven't really read much about it. I would love to know if that was like, what was the reaction to it at the time? Because like, there's a lot of kind of grotesque kind of images, like the Wicked Witch of the West is like a kind of mammy figure, with like really sharp teeth and stuff. And there's some really interesting stuff going on there with like race in the film. But it's just also like just a joy to watch. The songs are so fun, really moving. Richard Pryor turns up, but then as the Wiz. I really was knocked over by it.
I don't know much about it. Like I've been watching some Sidney Lumet, but obviously like his stuff is so unbelievably like realist a lot of the time. So it's hard to imagine him doing something so camp. Yeah,
he usually does like cop films or like like courtroom dramas. Dog Day Afternoons is probably his most famous film, or like 12 Angry Men. Yeah. So like to see him do like this is like actually a massive surprise to me. But yeah, he does a good job. It's like really well put together. Real blast.
Yeah.
So the first film we're going to talk about today is Plainclothes. Now, Plainclothes is set in Syracuse in New York. It is set in the late 90s, and it follows Tom Blythe as Lucas, who is a young cop who's been assigned to a sting operation to entrap gay men who've picked up other men in public. Now, Lucas, as a very handsome young man, is the bait to lure these men into a kind of proposition, and his colleagues come in and arrest them. And Lucas is pretty conflicted about this because he himself is gay and is deep in the closet. But everything changes, however, when Lucas sets eyes on Andrew, who's played by Russell Tovey. So this time, instead of entrapping his mark, he instead meets Andrew at a later date, and a real kind of connection forms between them. This is the debut film from Carmi Emmy, an American filmmaker. It's part cop movie, part kind of romance, part kind of anxiety attack. Ellie, what do you make of this one?
So I really enjoyed this. I think the first thing about it is that like it's got such an interesting premise. It's got such an interesting setting. Like this was a real practice in US and UK police forces for decades throughout the 20th century. I think in the UK they were nicknamed the Pretty Police because their job was essentially to bait men into propositioning them for public sex and then slap them with a public indecency charge. So like an incredibly like cruel practice to essentially, in a world where sort of male intimacy is so chased out of everyday life. And we see that in the film, right? In the workplace and in his home life, his family life, that like male intimacy is this. So to be kind of like pushed into the margins and then to further kind of prosecute people for it is incredibly cruel. But there's also like some really interesting context that the film gives us about this practice, right? They say that like even though it's like clearly very unfair because the police are actively participating in this thing, they're the ones that are like making people, I don't know, expose themselves. Most people don't contest the judgment because they'd rather just pay the fine than show their face in court because they'll have families or careers or something like that. And then on top of it, there's this midway point, like this particularly dark scene that explains to us where this practice came from, where they show like a 1960s like police training film reel about why we do this. And it's so unbelievably propagandistic and just completely ridiculous and completely unconvincing. So it's kind of like cowardly as well as it is cruel. And that sets us up for a really interesting protagonist, someone who is participating in this system, someone who is the bait. And I was very skeptical that I would buy into Tom Blythe here as a kind of like romantic lead in this context. But I have to say that from the get-go, the film just shows him in such an interesting way. Like, while most of the film is shot in this very beautiful, I think it's like 16mm film, like it's very soft and fuzzy, and and quite nostalgic. When we see things from Lucas's perspective, it's done on video. It's done on this distorted, scratchy, kind of like a CCTV tape where nothing, like people's faces are just caught in glimpse, and it's all very fast, and it's, you know, light is incredibly like overbearing to it, and there's this mechanical clicking noise that covers up the sound of everyday life. So you get a really good sense. It's giving us a perspective that is as kind of like fragmented and you know, sort of fuzzy as the main character's psyche. And then along comes Russell Tovey, who you know, that's the first thing that he sees in great clarity. Things calm down when we have these long shots on Russell Tovey's face, and he just does such an unbelievably good job. These two have such great chemistry on screen. It's very funny because Russell Tovey, I grew up seeing in random roles on TV in the noughties and tens. So like I know him from Gavin and Stacey, and he's in like the Kylie Minogue episode of Doctor Who. And I think recently, you know, he's always done good work. He's recently been in this Russell T Davies series, Years and Years, which is sort of a dystopian sort of, you know, thriller series. But here, he's in an element that I've never really considered him, which is this kind of like ultra DILF. And he's just so unbelievably sexy in it. And he's like so, I don't know, like he's very reserved, he's very quiet in a way where, like, you know, Tom Blythe's character, Lucas, is able to get his marks because they're so keen to expose themselves, whereas he's just sort of withholding a little bit, and that makes him so much more desirable, and it makes their on-screen chemistry so great. And it's not just that, you know, it's rather beautiful and the love scenes are so well shot, and just the use of camera, the use of editing is so strong, but also just the fact that you've got these two guys who are living double lives, really, that allows for a lot of really interesting storytelling, a lot of like twists and dramatic shifts that you wouldn't expect. So it's incredibly watchable. I was not prepared for how sexy this film was. The only thing that I felt maybe that didn't fully get addressed, or maybe that just wasn't addressed correctly, is that like the other men's lives who Lucas has ruined, they do kind of fall into the background as the film goes on. Like he's clearly shown to be quite traumatized over his actions from the get-go, but the kind of contemplation of where he's at and how exactly he's making the world an unsafe place only really come to the surface when he wants that intimacy with Andrew, with Russell Tovey's character, when he realizes that he can't really feel comfortable with him in public because, you know, they live in a surveillance state that Lucas has helped create. So it's this sort of dramatic twist of irony, but at the same time, I think there is something quite unscrupulous about the fact that he only really shows a real drive to transform, to go on this journey that he goes on when he has the incentive of somebody that he fancies more than anybody else. It's just that all of the men whose lives he ruined up until this point were not hot enough, which is a very bleak reading of it, very cynical reading of it. That's possibly the worst, the most sort of cynical angle to it. But it was hanging over my head throughout the entire film. So I don't know, I really like felt from the get-go that I was, you know, primed to not root for this guy because he's so despicable, but they really win you over with that filmmaking technique, with that on-screen chemistry. And I'd be really interested to hear about other people and how they sort of responded to his character and whether or not they felt he could be forgiven or he deserved the kind of fulfillment that he gets by the end of the film. But overall, really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because it doesn't show him getting like hired for this job, but we see another colleague, like a rookie, getting hired, and clearly it's actually incredibly homoerotic the way he's getting hired, because you've got this kind of chief who looks like he's walked out of a, like, you know, like 90s porn set. He's got this moustache, he's very buff, he's always slapping the lads in the ass as they do training. You know, he's chosen because he looks good, and there's this weird thing of like chiefs trying to pick out the hottest cops who they think will attract other gay men. So it's a very interesting kind of setup. So we never actually see him getting picked, but we assume he's like encouraged to do the job because he's one of the younger cops and he looks good. So that was an interesting twist. And yet, but like, yeah, I don't know. I thought his guilt was very clear from the start, and I think that is, to me, was what's most impressive about this film. You know, Carmen Emery from the start really tries to get us inside Lucas's head, and I think she does that very well. And I was a bit confused by the VHS point of view at the beginning, because I should also say the film is kind of in flashback. The main sort of setup is he's at a kind of New Year's Eve party, I think it is,
Yeah.
with his whole family. And it's like, I think a year after his father's passed away. And there's a kind of like little MacGuffin that he's lost a letter, which is going to reveal that he's gay, because it's the letter that Andrew eventually gives him in the film. So that's going to set up, and then everything else is like you say, kind of like, it's almost like a fantasy. Like the lighting is so strange. Like often things are backlit with like these kind of like really kind of gauzy white light from the back, and then when we see Andrew's point of view, it's this kind of like really dirty, grainy VHS, which is suggests memory, but also suggests, like you say, surveillance and this kind of idea of being watched. And then later in the film, they actually start using VHS surveillance in the toilets as well. So that's all really well done, and I thought Tom Blythe was great. I thought he was like very convincing as this kind of conflicted young man. And I agree that the chemistry between the pair is very good. I did think the film did some strange things. Like, for example, the first hookup they have is almost like quite chaste. Like, they have a conversation that seems like it's going to be like a post-coital conversation, but then they actually have sex later. So it's like just some strange things. Like, that seems like a weird sort of setup. Like they like seem like they're going to have sex, and they just stop and have a big chat. But then they have sex later. So it's just some things were strangely done. But the one of the best scenes, I think, is a scene in a cinema. I think that's their first date, actually, where they go to watch a movie together. I can't remember what the old movie is, but they're watching an old movie, and it's in this kind of beautiful like picture house, and they go and they go to this kind of back room, and there's lots of kind of paraphernalia from the cinema kicking around, and Andrew does a very cute thing where he writes out Lucas's name, but it's not Lucas's name, which is also key to the film. Like, Lucas gives a false name. Yeah, but it's like really romantic, and like they used that space so well. And yeah, I think a lot of the locations are used really well. Like the mall where all the sting operations are set is very kind of cinematic space. Yeah, so like a really impressive film, really impressive debut. I did think it went to quite melodramatic places towards the end, and like actually quite a hilarious twist happens in the film, which I like it's not meant to be hilarious, but I found it kind of quite clunky. But I think there's like the acting is so good and the writing earlier in the film is so good that I kind of went along with it. So not a perfect film by any means, but look really affecting, and yeah, just really great at getting inside a character's mind, which is, I guess, what cinema's about. It's like putting you in somebody's feet and like putting you in their shoes, and that's like one of the hardest things to do as a filmmaker. And I think Carmen Emi does a really good job at it.
I think both characters are really interesting, and I get what you say about things kind of being told in an unconventional order. Like, I don't think it's all, I don't know, like it's that thing where I don't like it when films do that for no real reason, but this actually felt kind of like jumbled up enough that there really was some effort that I had to put in to be like, wait, so where is this in the timeline? Like, are we up to, so he said that, so this has happened before then. And you piece it together, and it is understandable, but like, there's a little bit of effort involved. And what that reminded me of, like the last time that I remember watching a film where I'm kind of like trying to plot out the timeline in my head, was Challengers, which also has like a really interesting use of like camera and like a really sexy on-screen dynamic. So yeah, I don't know, this is, I don't know, like, as you also say, like, as time goes on, it gets into slightly more melodramatic places. That is also when I was sort of feeling like the kind of more, I don't know, enormous implications of his life work are kind of like falling to the background, and it is feeling a little bit more like a conventional coming-of-age queer love story, with the kind of hallmarks of that genre that you might expect. I won't give too much away, but like standing up to homophobic relatives or something, like stuff like that, that's maybe less as contemplative as someone who has like created this world in which they themselves can't survive. But ultimately, like, I don't know, I think that the kind of like vibrancy and the kind of cleverness of the way that it's filmed was really winning me over by the end, and I did really get a lot out of it. Yeah.
There's also like a really sweet relationship between Lucas and his ex-girlfriend. So like Lucas has been in a long-term relationship, and he does break it off, and he does confess to his ex that he has kind of like feelings for guys, or like he's attracted to guys. But then he's got this kind of like, a lot of the anxiety is also, will she reveal his secret, you know? Like, and then there's a great scene where somebody arrives at a party who turns out to be like a best friend of his ex-girlfriend, and he's just convinced that she knows his secret, and like that scene is also very powerful. So yeah, like again, it's just like the paranoia of not being out, and like, you know, the kind of the fear of like your secret being revealed is like very kind of like, well, you know, that the kind of, yeah, the drama of that is like really well portrayed in this. So yeah, I was impressed. Should we do Letterboxd scores? Yeah. What do you reckon?
I would say 4 stars for this one.
Yeah, I really did like this film. I think I'll say 3.5 though, just because I feel, you know, I mean, I feel it's a bit harsh because it's also a very low budget film. Like, it's like a great piece of like low budget filmmaking, but I just feel like there was a couple of like rookie errors in being like a first time filmmaker. Like, I feel like there's a couple of things that could have like been better, like ironed out. And I feel like the fact that I was like kind of laughing at the melodrama is maybe that's part of me being like immature, but also like I feel like that could have been like resolved a bit better. So yeah, 3.5. Very, very impressive though. And yeah, I was gonna say, agree. Russell Tovey. I've never really rated Russell Tovey's actor. I think he's like a great person and a great kind of like advocate. He's like a great queer advocate. But I've never felt he's been totally lost on screen. He always feels like Russell Tovey, but he actually feels quite different. Maybe it's the American accent or something. He actually feels like he did get lost in this performance. And
a very good American accent. He looks different than he's ever looked before, which is a surprise because he wasn't unattractive, but now he's like hot. Yeah. Like that's what I'm curious to see about how people take away from this film, if they do feel that it is like, some people might feel that it's kind of exploitative about this like quite dark period in queer history, and it's using that to, I don't know, show like sexy men, or whether or not people are just like, this is actually really riveting and like the twists are really enjoyable. Because I felt like it was a bit of a mixed bag for me, but I definitely felt like it was, I had such a good time. I had to be 4 stars. Yeah, I mean, I recommend this as well. I think it's great. So Plainclothes is out now in cinemas from Curzon, and it will be in GFT from Friday. So go see it. Okay, on to Good Boy. Now, Good Boy is your typical haunted house horror, but with a major twist. It's told from the point of view of Indy, who's an adorable golden retriever. So we follow Indy as he travels with his owner Todd to Todd's family cabin in the woods. And from the moment they arrive, Indy is spooked because he's increasingly concerned for Todd's safety, as there's some sort of dark supernatural force that seems to be lurking in the shadows. Ellie, I love dogs. I love horror films. I don't know about you, but what did you think of Good Boy? I mean, I love both these things. And the thing about it is that there is a bit of a, I don't know, there's a sort of special role that dogs have in horror films, right? So if you have like, I don't know, a film where a couple buy like an old house or something and they show up with a dog, then you know that dog's gonna, one of two, probably both things are gonna happen. One is that the haunting will somehow affect the dog before it affects the humans. I don't know if this is some folkloric thing that we have, but like dogs bark at, you know, empty corners, they must be able to see a ghost that we can't see. So immediately, like, taking it from the dog's perspective is kind of a given. But the other thing that you're always thinking anytime you see a dog in a horror film is, does the dog die? There's even a whole website named after it. So it plays with that kind of idea, that kind of convention. And yeah, it's just a question of like, is this kind of a big enough idea for a film to stand on by itself, or is it a little bit gimmicky? Because to be completely honest, they do manage to have an interesting little arc for the canine protagonist. That kind of other thing about dogs, which is that they are kind of unconditionally loyal to their owners, and it really plays with that as well. That is something that gets challenged because it's Indy's most endearing trait. It's why we love dogs, is because they don't, I don't know, judge us for the way we live our lives, and you know, we always root for them, but at the same time, like, his loyalty might be what's endangering him in this haunted house. So I don't know, like, I immediately thought that the director seemed really up for the challenge. It's filmed in a really interesting way. Like, you know, we stick with the dog throughout, but we also have these little flashbacks to when he's a puppy, which is absolutely adorable, by the way. But also, you know, as we go in and out through this haunted house, it's always sort of shot from Indy's eye level, so it's quite unconventional to kind of like be looking up at people throughout horror films. As a matter of fact, the Todd, the owner, I feel like we never even really see his face until certain points, which does feel like it could be a bit Tom and Jerry, but manages to never be, because actually the environment is also great. Like, this is a good haunted house. It's very spooky looking. It's very sort of rustic, very isolated. And I feel like the director has a good sense of how to use the dog and the camera interestingly to capture it all. So it's like well made. But I suppose the first question that I'm asking when I sit down to watch a horror film is it scary? And I'm going to say straight up, I wasn't scared in the slightest bit during the entirety of this film. Like, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the fact that in haunted house fiction, it's weird because the ghosts don't just kill us. We don't just step through the threshold and then the ghost instantly kills us. There has to be a 2-hour long film where they're like essentially just existing to frighten us, just to mess with us. So they usually do it in like, I don't know, like strange sounds or strange things that you just don't expect. And it relies on our sense of normalcy first to break that. Whereas like for a dog, everything's kind of like of interest, every noise, every sort of little light. So I don't know, I felt like the ghosts aren't really there for Indy. They're not necessarily trying to scare Indy, and as such they're not really trying to scare the audience. They're trying to get the owner, and we're trying to protect the owner. So there's a somewhat muddled sense of like what we're here for and whether or not this is scary to us. And I have to say that the actual thing that we're afraid of, like there's not a great deal of interesting imagery when it comes to this haunted house thing. More often than not, and I think this happens like multiple times within the first 20 minutes, is that the dog looks in the corner, there's an extra standing in a black morph suit, he looks back at his owner, looks back to the corner, and then the extra is gone. And that happens so many times, and it's just really unfortunate because it's just not super effective. There's not much to write home about there. As we get closer to the climax of the film, there's a little bit more interesting imagery, and this sort of phantom is a little bit more fleshed out. And whilst you're very aware that there isn't a huge budget for special effects, there's some really earnest attempts at making stuff look spooky, which I did appreciate. But truthfully, like, don't expect a real like nail biter. It's not particularly frightening, but at the same time, it's some like it's an adorable dog movie. Like, that's all there is to say about it. I believe that the dog is actually the director's dog. So it's really just a relationship between him and his dog. It's him trying to elicit this sort of like great performance from his dog, and to kind of contemplate on like the changing relationship that we have with our pets, and how sometimes we're good owners to them and sometimes we're not good owners to them, and like what's best for them out of this. So there are questions up in the air. And I think that if you are a dog lover, I grew up with dogs, my partner who I watched it with also grew up with dogs, we just had a great time. It's not a scary film, but it's a great film for dog lovers, is what my feeling is.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page, actually. I should have said the director was Ben Leonberg. So I think if you look at it in terms of like a first film, like a very low budget film, it's actually quite ingenious. I think it's like quite a clever idea, and I think it's executed quite well. But I think, yeah, the main problem is there's not enough meat there. Like, I think if this was a short film or something, it would actually have been great. But my biggest issue was, like you say, the director only has one sort of like card to play, and that is like the dog looks anxious towards camera, something moves in the background, we cut away and it's gone, you know, like, and it happens so many times. And like the dog is great. I'm not going to slag off Indy. I think Indy does give a great performance, but the problem is with a dog can't really emote beyond like very simple, you know, I'm scared, I'm anxious, like, you know, I you know, like that's it. And like, as good as this performance is from this dog and as affecting as it is, it can't really do what a human actor can do. So there's never like anything to really hold on to. And like you say, they do this kind of quite cool thing where like it's like literal from the dog's point of view, because like you say, it's low camera and we don't see the human's face for like almost all the way through. But there's no one to really connect to apart from the dog. So yeah, I felt that was like a flaw in the film. Like, I feel like like the director should realise that actually this is limiting me too much. Like, I enjoy like how the director set these limitations, and it's literally going to be from the dog's point of view. But maybe they could have changed it up and had it sometimes from the owner's point of view, and that would maybe give you something different to look at, a different kind of like style of filmmaking. Yeah. And it's also, the film has also got a twist. Like, we realise what's going to happen pretty early. And this is another thing, it doesn't really have a build up. It actually just starts. Like, even I think the first scene is like, it gives you a clue to what's going to happen. And then, you know, it's like relentless, essentially. So yeah, a really smart idea, executed in a kind of disappointing way, I would say. I'd also say that there's also a part of me that's also wondering, how did they get this performance from the dog? Mm-hmm. Like, were they stressing the dog out? Because the dog looks anxious all the way through. The dog is like you say, worried for its owner. It's not like scared necessarily. It's not like, but it's more like, oh, the dog is worried that the owner's going to get hurt. But how do you get a dog to do that? Do you make the dog anxious? And obviously a dog doesn't know it's in a film. Like, yeah. So like does a dog understand it's playing a part? So like, also I think it's maybe a bit cruel, you know, like, I'm not saying that they should have done Like, I'm glad it's not a CGI dog, because I think the dog does a great performance. But I do wonder, was that dog stressed out for this? Did it have a bad time, you know?
That's probably a bigger question that I don't ask myself often enough about the ethics of filming animals. But like, I think that retrievers are like incredibly well trained, right? Like, that's why they're always great on screen, is because like they get dog whisperers who know how to like make them pretend to whine. Like, you can make a dog bark without actually making it aggressive, right? So it makes sense to me. But I don't know how well Indy's been trained. Seems really well trained because, like I say, he interacts with the camera so well. But yeah, I do think you're right. Like, unfortunately, it is just the nature that whenever there's like a haunting happening, and it's not to us, it's not to the dog, it's to this guy in the background, and all our questions are about that. And like, at times, like, it seems unbearably kind of like abrupt with what it's doing and just saying that there is a haunting going on. But at other times, like, you're asking that question, you've got all this sort of curiosity about like, what is the nature of this haunting, and like, what is it? You know, we talk about like in films, like haunted houses often symbolize something, and there's some little bits of context from the very beginning that like, this is his grandfather's abandoned house, and also he like has a medical illness, and it's this thing. So is it representing like his general kind of decay? Is it representing some sort of generational trauma? Is it representing like just again like that kind of way in which people can, I don't know, as part of grief, shut themselves off from their families, whether or not those families are humans or pets. So it's got all these sort of questions up in the air, but, you know, the film isn't really grappling with them. It is really just sort of sticking us with the dog, and it does feel quite limited in its scope. So even though I did have a good time, like, I think that you're right, it probably would have been better as a short story, because it is just sort of exhibiting quite a cool filmmaking trick rather than building what's a really vast and thoughtful film by itself.
Yeah, probably good for like first time filmmakers to watch, though, what you can do with like very little money and just like, you know, a dog and a camera, you know. Yeah. But I also need a correction. I said it was a golden retriever. It's actually a Nova Scotia duck tolling retriever, which I've never heard of. But really good dog.
Yeah, great dog.
Yeah. So Good Boy is in cinemas now from Vertigo releasing. Should we do some letterbox scores?
I would say for this, maybe a 3. And I think even that is that's a generous.
Yeah, I would say, to me, it's probably a 2. I actually found it quite boring. Mm-hmm. Like it really kind of wears its welcome because it is like so repetitive. But I would say if you're interested in filmmaking, it's actually worth checking out just to see, like I say, what you can do with like very little. But yeah, I think for a general audience, there's probably better horror films out there. Sorry.
Which brings us to our next section.
So as Alice says, it's Halloween season. You're all probably thinking of horrors to watch as the witching hour approaches. So yeah, Ellie and I were going to chat through some horrors and horror adjacent movies that we were planning to watch either on the big screen or on the small screen. So Ellie, you got anything you want to recommend?
So in terms of on the small screen, I don't know, every October that comes around, I just watch a classic here and there, or rewatch a classic here and there. And every couple of years I find myself rewatching what I think is like the I don't know, progenitor of all great horror films, which is Night of the Living Dead by George A. Romero. It's as early as it gets in the horror canon, 1968. Or rather, I should say that there's horror films up until this point, you know, and you think of like Alfred Hitchcock and stuff like that. But this feels like the very first time that like a horror film was capable of I don't know, becoming something bigger than its sort of B-movie origins. Like, It's interesting in particular because George A. Romero was really constrained financially, so he had essentially worked as a director of television episodes and commercials and stuff like that. So he's just got like pals from this career of his that he's bringing to a condemned house that they're allowed to destroy in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, and he's just thinking like, how can I contribute to this B-movie scene, like with no budget? Because that's what they're usually about, right? Is, you know, some goofy special effect like a blob or a big flying saucer. And he has nothing, so he just gets a bunch of extras to pretend to be dead people. And then in doing so, kind of advertently and inadvertently breaks every possible social taboo of the 1960s at the time. And it's surprising like how absolutely brutal it gets. It uses not just like violence and and kind of desecration of dead bodies, because zombies certainly weren't a thing in the public consciousness at this time. But also there's like violence involving against and from like young children. And there's cannibalism, which again, we now are pretty desensitized to in the zombie genre. But at the time when you're watching it, especially, like like raw meat from a butcher or something like that. And it's like quite horrific. You can't kind of believe the 60s was obviously like a very like countercultural and kind of revolutionary time. But in filmmaking, at least, because you're bringing together so many like resources, you think that you're working under certain, and also I don't even think 1968 was maybe just when the Hays Code had finally been like scattered out. So like it really is just hitting on every possible kind of like, I don't know, thing that people are shocked by or frightened by at this point. And that, again, inadvertently includes the fact that it's led by a really strong black protagonist. It's Dwayne Jones who plays Ben. And the story behind this is that it was like Romero did not cast him because he wanted to make a statement about like racial issues in America at the time, but because out of all of just the random players that he had, Dwayne Jones gave the best audition, which totally makes sense because he, out of the cast, feels the most like the kind of hero. And then on top of that, there's just like, I don't know, a little bit of a kind of like warping of those sort of B-movie conventions. Like I say, in these films, the army always shows up at the end and sort of saves the day, but in this instance, they're too late to really save anyone and actually wind up making the problem worse because these are just a bunch of sort of, I don't know, rural guys in like jeans and flannel shirts who have guns and are just willing to go out and shoot anyone, and like they can't discern the dead from the living. So like a kind of very troubling kind of idea of like people's capacity for violence that hasn't really gone away. But the thing that I always forget about this film, or at least the thing that I forgot about this film until this rewatch, is that like how much of it takes place in the radio, in the TV. How much of it is like once the survivors are all safe, boarded up in this little shack in the middle of nowhere, we spend a lot of time listening to these radio reports and watching this little like newsreel on the TV. And it's just so fascinating that like a big part of Night of the Living Dead, it's not about like this kind of completely pared down, raw little house, big field, bunch of zombies, you've got a gun, what do you do? Like, no, it is actually about the media of the time and experiencing something horrific through the media of the time. What then was becoming our first ideas of like mass media, and the way in which it's completely incompetently showing how bad these guys are running around with their guns trying to save everybody, these militia that they're kind of trying to suggest are a solution when the viewer understands that they're not. So like very, very interesting. Like such a strong film that was made with practically like a hope and a dream that it just created this DNA that lives on in practically every horror movie in the last 60 years. I don't think I'd watched it since before the pandemic. If it's been a while since you've watched it, give it a rewatch. It's like public domain. I think it's free to watch online. And it rips. It's a great film. So that's a great way to start your October rewatching. But I believe that you have some things that you think people should go check out.
Yeah, I mean, well, we could go into Perfect Blue now, because Perfect Blue is one of the films that we were going to talk about, because it's out on re-release just now, and we thought we toyed with reviewing that as well. But since it's like essentially a horror film, we should probably chat about it. So it's like one of the great animes of the 90s, directorial debut of Satoshi Kon, who went on to make a string of like masterpieces in the 90s and 2000s before he died really young at 46 of cancer. But yeah, I think Perfect Blue, I believe is like selling out everywhere. It's like I was at the JFT the other night and like all the screenings were sold out. Yeah, and it's like a kind of such an influential film, like if you haven't seen it, it's about a pop star called Mima, I think her name is, who quits her girl band to pursue a career as an actress. She lands a role in this kind of pulpy detective show on TV, and it's very controversial. People are angry that she's left the pop world, but everyone around her starts to end up dead while she's on this show. While this is happening, she's also been stalked by a fan who keeps posting her every move online. Yeah, and it's like the film really descends into paranoia, and like her visions like become confused with reality. Really kind of like amazing film. Like it was, I think it's 97, I want to say it was made. So it's like just when the internet was like becoming a thing and it was in people's houses and like we had these chat boards, but it really kind of like, it like really predicts what online culture is going to be like. You know, this is before social media, but the idea of like the way the celebrities would become like their every move would be like stalked by like, or could be followed by fans is really interesting. In the way that like celebrity is like obsessed over seems even more kind of pertinent now. And then just the filmmaking, like this kind of lucid filmmaking where reality and fantasy kind of blend. It'd been done before, but I think, you know, using the anime form, like Con really like found a kind of visual language that was really exciting and was so influential on people like famously Darren Aronofsky, who ripped this film off so much, and like Requiem for a Dream, and specifically in Black Swan.
Yeah.
So yeah, an amazing film to see on the big screen.
It's a great film. I see what you're saying about it kind of being about the advent of the internet in a really interesting way, because it is sort of like, you know, the exploitation of people's image for media existed long before then, and you get a sense of that in general out of her attempt to move from music into film. And like the people at the heads of this industry always seem to be like really exploitative and sleazy, and she herself is haunted by this ghost of her sort of pop idol persona, which is really, really interesting. A nice sort of supernatural dichotomy with the realist threat of her real life stalker. But the internet is different. It allows for this level of like participation, and I think that's really what this film is about, you know, when you become famous, you kind of relinquish your identity to other people, and her stalker through the internet is able to keep this blog of her every move and kind of write his own ideas about her feelings about it, and kind of like, you know, control her narrative in this way that like, yeah, you're allowed to kind of like play with identity on the internet. That's something that's identified really, really early on in the 90s. And if you watch it now, it like hits just as much today based on how the internet has gone over these last 30 years. So absolutely, like, give it a check if there's tickets still available. But it is one of those great films. I always think, because I completely agree in that it's so similar to Aronofsky's work, and I think that there's even shots that he did like shot for shot recreations in Black Swan. But I don't know, that kind of like warped reality of like the fiction blending in with, you know, the particularly the project that the actor is working on blending in. That felt very Lynchian to me. It felt like Mulholland Drive or Inland Empire, like his more kind of later explorations into the psychology of starlets. That's kind of at play here. But really, like, it's its own total thing. Like, it has that anime framework that kind of really sets it apart and gets really psychedelic and really freaky. And it's very... it hits. It's really good. So check out Perfect Blue for sure. And in terms of, so other releases, I don't know, I'm like looking at things now. There's, you know, Filmhouse have a bunch of classics. They've got The Thing on the 26th of October. They've got Bong Joon-ho's The Host on the 29th of October. These are great like monster movies, but they're also, I don't know, those great little movies about, I don't know, something not being quite right. Deception, a kind of like cracked social situation where people turning against each other is really the root of the problem, but it doesn't relinquish on just how unbelievably spectacular and gory and horrible these monsters are. So those are two films that I would definitely recommend from the Filmhouse's program this October. I
was also going to recommend Black Phone 2.
Oh,
now, did you see Black Phone?
I didn't see Black Phone, but I keep hearing it's quite good.
Yeah, it kind of slipped by. Like I saw it after it came out. It's like Scott Derrickson, who, what did he do? He did like Doctor Strange. He has like done some sort of bigger stuff. He's kind of more famous for his horror films though. I thought this is excellent. It's like quite a grim story about a kind of serial child kidnapper played by Ethan Hawke. Ethan Hawke, one of the best Ethan Hawke performances. He's so chilling, and it's like the idea is like he's a child killer. He takes the boys and he kidnaps them and he keeps them in his basement for a while. And the film's incredibly dark, but what happens is like there's this phone in the basement which becomes like a conduit to the afterlife. So all his previous victims suddenly can contact the current victim or the current future victim who's been kidnapped and in the basement, and starts kind of telling them about information about the killer and tips of how to like survive, like how like so it's a really, I mean, it's a horrible idea, but it's like it's like quite a dark film in general, like very kind of creepy, but it's also kind of a survival film as well, and sort of like a great thrill ride to watch. I've no idea how they're going to do this sequel, because they've got the same kid who, spoiler alert, survives the first kidnap. He's older, and it seems like Ethan Hawke is back from the dead after him. I can only go by the trailer, but I was so impressed by Black Phone when I saw it first time round. I'm really keen to see it on the big screen again. Very keen to see this sequel on the big screen. In terms of older movies on the big screen, I would really give a shout out to All Day Horror Madness. Now, I think we've talked about All Night Horror Madness before on the podcast.
I think we programmed our own All Night Horror
We
Madness.
did. That was like, you should look back on that. So this is a long-running thing that's done by a programmer and filmmaker called Matt Palmer. He just puts on really great films, usually shows them on 35mm, and if you are getting like me and you don't want to like stay up all night, or you can't stay up all night anymore, this is a good alternative because it's an all-day horror fest. So it's on the 26th of October. It's a really nice mix of films, like a lot of kind of like 80s kind of horror zombie films. Actually, there's the Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue, which I think it might be 70s actually, but it's like a really great Spanish director. I can't remember his name, but it's like a Spanish director shooting in the UK. Really great. There's another Italian zombie film called Demons. There's Candyman, the kind of 90s cameraman, the kind of urban horror, which is great and like very underrated. There's Sleepaway Camp, a very kind of notorious kind of 80s slasher with like an amazing twist, which I will not spoil, but it's become a kind of real kind of like I think it's been really kind of like, especially in the queer community, been sort of reevaluated, and I've heard like some people really love it. Yeah, it's a wild ride. And they're showing The Return of the Living Dead, which is not Romero. This is like, I think, a great film. It's like a comedy zombie film, which is definitely inspired by Romero's kind of zombie world. And it's like, but it's kind of very punk. It's like,
it's like a group of punks, isn't it?
Yeah, a group of punks. I think it's like, if I remember right, it's like some sort of gas is released from like some sort of military experiment, and it turns like a town into zombies, and the punks are hanging out in the graveyard, and all the zombies come out of the grave. So very fun movie, very gory. And it's like Romero but extra, you know. It's like maybe not got the kind of same kind of social conscience, but it's actually very fun.
It's got a great soundtrack as well, very like metal, very fun.
Yeah. Talking about soundtracks, there was another one we wanted to give a shout out to. Do you want me to do that? So that's this is going to be touring. This is Done Dead and Halloween. Another great film festival actually. Are doing a tour of the Phantom of the Opera, the what would it be? It's a 100-year anniversary, so it must be the 1925 version, with Lon Chaney, who's famously the man of many faces. He plays the Phantom. And what's special about this is it's got a live score by Andrew Vasilik and Tommy Perman. I hope that's how you say your name, Andrew. Apologies if not. Who are a great kind of jazz duo, who are going to be performing live. So it's coming to the GFT Filmhouse. It's going to be at the DCA on Halloween itself on the 31st. Going a few more places. Yeah, that's
great. Yeah. The only thing left that I have to shout out is I know that Leith Depot are doing, I think on the 26th of October, they're doing a screening of 26th of October. It's Anna Lily Amirpour's A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which I've only kind of like thought to flag. I saw this years ago. I saw this when I was like 18 or something like that, and it left such a strong impression on me. It's such a good vampire film. And I just think that after earlier this year, with how much Sinners kind of exploded, I think people are really interested in finding like vampire films that are set in interesting cultural like times and places, and that are using the concept of vampires really interestingly. So it is, I believe, set in Iran, and it is about a sort of like young girl who skateboards around wearing a chador, who's also like a vampire and preys on male predators. And it's an unbelievably like satisfying and really, really cool, stylish vampire flick. So if you're free on the 26th of October, get yourself down to Leith Depot to see A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
Yeah, and that's from Leaf Kino, who are like a new kind of film group who actually have great stuff on every week. I think they're really cool. My final shout out is something you can watch at home if you have Shudder. I don't know if I should actually get Shudder. It looks really cool. But I don't know if you've ever watched any of the VHS franchise.
I haven't, but I know they're quite like big now, right? Like
yeah,
there's so many of them.
I like. I think this is the 8th or 9th installment. I've seen the first two. Really enjoyed them. The premise is they're kind of anthology films, so it's like a bunch of short films kind of like jammed together with a kind of theme. I believe they used to always be kind of found footage. That was kind of like the idea. So it's like found footage style films, and I think that's still the style, but don't quote me on that because, like I say, I haven't really kept up with it. But the reason I'm interested in the new one, well, first of all, it's Halloween, and I think any horror set at Halloween is fun, but this one is interesting to me because it's one of the segments, or the wraparound segment to the film, is directed by Brian M. Ferguson, who's a really talented Scottish director who I think we've championed a few times on the podcast, and he's made films that we've done like screenings with the Cine Skinny stuff. So it's really great to see him sort of breaking out, because he's been great for years. He's been making like really great short films out of Scotland with no budget, essentially, very little support from like Creative Scotland or anything. He's been usually doing it out on his own, and he's made a couple of professional ones with like Channel 4 and things like that. A lot of really great movies. So it's really nice to see he's been recognised and they've picked him up for this. So he's done the wraparound called Diet Phantasma. Supposedly it's great. It's got all the reviews I've said I've seen have really kind of picked out Brian's section as being like very good, very funny. Because that's the thing, he's a horror director, but he's actually also very funny, very stylish. And I believe his section is about a company that are trying to test diet sodas, keep giving it to customers or like test subjects, and with increasingly disastrous results. So there's something in the chemical that is turning people monstrous or something like that. So it sounds very gory, very funny, and I think it sounds perfect because like it sounds like there's like an escalation. So every time we go back to this framing device, it gets crazier. And in between, there's lots of good films. Like for example, Alex Ross Perry directs one of the sections, which I'm really interested in. He's a great filmmaker. We recently talked about his film Pavement, about the band Pavements. No, sorry, wrong way around. His film Pavements, about the band Pavement, and he's made kind of horror adjacent films. He's made like Her Smell, which was like a really great movie, and he did make a horror film with Elizabeth Moss, but I can't remember its name. Anyway, really
Golden
good.
Exits.
Which one?
Golden Exits.
No, it wasn't Golden Exits.
Listen Up, Philip.
No.
So many. The Color Wheel.
No. We'll get there.
Queen of Earth. Yeah, Queen of Earth.
Queen of Earth was a really good horror film that he made a few years ago. So yeah, it's nice to see him back in the horror realm. So this is a legitimate film. He's got like a really good filmmaker. And yeah, if you've got Shudder, I would give this a watch. Or I think there's like trials you can get.
Yeah.
So yeah, I recommend Shudder. Why not? I think that is everything we wanted to say.
October's worth of scary films. Yeah.
Yeah. So as ever, thank you, Ellie.
Thank you, Jamie.
If you want to get in touch in the usual places. We have Instagram, we have Twitter, and we have an email, which is just cineskinny at the skinny.co.uk. We'll be back in a couple of weeks at full strength, hopefully. You may also have heard at some point Anna Heat, or may not. Maybe Anna Heat will tell us next time what she was watching.
Maybe we're just referencing something that never happened. Yes,
this is why we need to plan better. But either way, I'm sure Anna Heat will tell us about her time at London.
I can't wait to hear.
At some point. So that's all from us. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.